On the night of October 8, 1871, a fire started in a barn on the southwest side of Chicago. Within hours, it had consumed an entire city block. By the time it was over, more than 17,000 buildings were gone. 300 people were dead. 100,000 were homeless. And the fire department, one of the largest in the country at the time, had been almost completely helpless to stop it. Not because they lacked courage, not because they lacked equipment, but because the water ran out. Chicago in 1871 had a water system. It had fire engines. It had trained firefighters who knew exactly what to do. What it did not have, in nearly enough quantity, in nearly enough locations, was a reliable way to get water from underground pipes to the surface fast enough to fight a fire of that scale. The hydrants that existed were too few, too far apart, and in several cases, simply broken. The Great Chicago Fire is remembered as a disaster. What it actually was a demonstration, a full-scale proof of concept for everything that was wrong with urban fire suppression infrastructure in America. And it was not the first. 4 years earlier, in 1867, a fire in Portland, Maine, destroyed nearly the entire downtown. Before that, the Great New York City Fire of 1835 burned 50 city blocks and caused financial losses so catastrophic that several insurance companies went bankrupt paying claims. In 1849, a fire in St. Louis burned 23 steamboats and 15 city blocks. In 1851, San Francisco burned and then burned again, 6 times in 18 months. The pattern was the same every time. Fire starts small. Fire spreads faster than firefighters can respond. Water supply fails or proves inadequate. City burns. By the mid-19th century, this was not an accident. It was a predictable outcome of the way cities were built. Wood-framed buildings packed tightly together. Open flame as the primary source of heat and light, and fire suppression infrastructure that had not kept pace with how fast cities were growing. Every major American city was one dry summer and one unattended candle away from the same fate. And most of them already knew it. What they did not yet have was the technology to stop it. Before the fire hydrant existed, fighting a fire in a city was a problem of physics that nobody had fully solved. Water is heavy. A single gallon weighs just over 8 pounds. Moving enough of it fast enough to suppress a structure fire before the fire spreads to the next building and the one after that requires either very large containers, very fast delivery, or both. In the early 19th century, cities had neither. The primary method of urban fire suppression before modern infrastructure was the bucket brigade. Hundreds of civilians would form a line from the nearest water source, a river, a well, a cistern, passing buckets hand to hand toward the fire. It was slow, exhausting, and fundamentally incapable of matching the speed at which fire consumes a dry wooden building. A bucket brigade could take 20 minutes to move enough water to fill a bathtub. A fire in a wood frame building can consume the entire structure in under 10. The first fire engines, horse-drawn hand pumps, appeared in American cities in the early 1800s. They were an improvement. They could move water faster than human hands and reach heights that buckets could not. But they still needed water delivered to them. Someone still had to bring the water to the pump, or the pump had to be positioned close enough to a natural water source to draw from it directly. This created an obvious problem in the middle of a dense city block. Rivers and wells were not conveniently located next to every building. Cisterns, underground tanks filled with stored water, were built beneath some city streets for exactly this purpose, but they had a fixed capacity. Once empty, they took hours to refill, and in a major fire, they emptied quickly. Philadelphia tried a partial solution in 1801 when it built one of the first municipal water distribution systems in America, a network of wooden pipes carrying water from a central pumping station to various parts of the city. London had been experimenting with similar systems since the 1600s. The idea was sound. The execution was incomplete. The wooden pipes leaked. They rotted. They burst under pressure. And crucially, they had no standardized connection points at the surface, no reliable way for a firefighter to access the water inside the pipe quickly during an emergency. When a building was on fire and firefighters needed water from an underground main, the standard procedure in many cities was to physically dig up the street, break open the water main by hand, and let the water pool in the hole. Firefighters would then pump from the hole. They called these improvised access points fire plugs. And the hole they dug, the pit in the street above a broken open water main, was the direct predecessor of what would eventually become the fire hydrant. The problem was that digging up a street took time nobody had during a fire. It damaged the water infrastructure every single time it was used, and it required a firefighter to know exactly where the underground pipe was. Information that was not always accurate, not always recorded, and not always passed down when fire companies changed personnel. Cities were fighting fire with technology that had not fundamentally changed in 2 centuries. And every time a major fire burned unchecked, the same conclusion emerged from the rubble. The system needed a permanent, accessible, reliable connection point at street level. It needed something that had not been invented yet. Here is the uncomfortable truth about the history of the fire hydrant. Nobody knows who invented it. This is not a gap in the historical record caused by neglect or indifference. It is a gap caused by a fire. The United States Patent Office in Washington, D.C., burned on December the 15th, 1836. The fire destroyed more than 7,000 patent models and roughly 9,000 patent drawings. The physical records of nearly every invention registered in America up to that point. Among the patents lost was the original documentation for the fire hydrant. Whatever was filed, whoever filed it, the evidence no longer exists. What historians have been able to reconstruct is incomplete and contested. The earliest documented fire hydrant in the United States is generally attributed to Frederick Graff Sr., the chief engineer of the Philadelphia Waterworks, sometime around 1801. Graff's design was a post, mounted at street level, with an integrated valve that could be opened to release water from the underground main below, eliminating the need to dig up the street each time water was needed. It was functional, relatively simple, and solved the core problem of access time. But Graff's priority is disputed. There are claims, with partial documentation, suggesting similar devices were in use in other American cities in the same period. Some historians point to evidence of hydrant-like structures in New York and Boston predating Graff's recorded work. The Patent Office fire means none of these competing claims can be definitively settled. What is not disputed is the basic design principle, a vertical pipe connected to an underground water main, with a valve mechanism at street level, allowing firefighters to access pressurized water quickly without excavation. Once that concept existed, it spread. The question of who first built it is lost to the same kind of fire the device was designed to prevent. There is an irony in that which cities at the time were too busy burning to appreciate. The early fire hydrant solved one problem and immediately revealed 3 others. The first problem was pressure. A hydrant is only useful if the water coming out of it is moving fast enough to fight a fire. Early municipal water systems relied on gravity. Water flowed downhill from elevated reservoirs and cisterns through underground pipes. In flat cities or in neighborhoods located uphill from the water source, the pressure was often inadequate. A firefighter could open a hydrant and get a trickle instead of a torrent. The pipe was connected. The water was there. But the physics didn't cooperate. Steam-powered water pumps, introduced in American cities in the 1840s and 1850s, began to solve the pressure problem by actively pushing water through the distribution system rather than relying on gravity alone. But the transition was slow. Many cities upgraded their pumping capacity without upgrading their pipe infrastructure. High-pressure water moving through old, undersized pipes produced its own problems. Burst mains, failed connections, flooded streets. The second problem was standardization. In the mid-19th century, there was no universal standard for fire hydrant connections. Different cities used different thread patterns on their hydrant outlets. Different fire departments used different hose fittings. In a mutual aid scenario, where firefighters from one city came to help fight a fire in another, their equipment frequently could not connect to the local hydrants. This was not a theoretical inconvenience. During major fires, neighboring fire departments were routinely called for assistance, and just as routinely found their hoses physically incompatible with the local water supply infrastructure. Men and equipment arrived to fight a fire and stood useless because the threads didn't match. The problem persisted for decades. It was not until 1904, when the Great Baltimore Fire burned for 30 hours and destroyed 1,500 buildings, partly because out-of-town firefighters could not connect to Baltimore's hydrants, that the scale of the standardization failure became impossible to ignore nationally. The National Fire Protection Association began pushing for uniform standards in the years that followed. The process took most of the early 20th century to complete. The third problem was location. A hydrant is only useful if it is close enough to the fire to be practical. Early hydrant placement was inconsistent, determined by where water mains happened to run, not by systematic analysis of where fires were most likely to occur or how far a hose could practically stretch. Dense commercial districts sometimes had adequate hydrant coverage. Residential neighborhoods, particularly working-class and immigrant neighborhoods on the outskirts of city centers, often did not. This meant that the hydrant, like street lighting before it, was unevenly distributed in ways that followed existing patterns of wealth and political influence. The neighborhoods that most needed reliable fire suppression infrastructure were frequently the ones with the least of it. By 1904, American cities believed they had solved the urban fire problem. Brick and steel construction had replaced wood framing in most major commercial buildings. Municipal water systems had expanded significantly since the disasters of the 1870s and 1880s. Fire departments had professionalized. Steam-powered fire engines had given way to early motorized vehicles. Hydrants were more numerous and better distributed than at any previous point in history. Baltimore, Maryland was considered a model city in this regard. Its downtown commercial district was dense, well-built, and served by what city officials believed was an adequate fire suppression infrastructure. On the morning of February 7, 1904, a fire broke out in the basement of the John E. Hurst & Company dry goods building on German Street. Within minutes, it had spread to adjacent buildings. Within an hour, it was beyond the capacity of Baltimore's fire department to control alone. Calls went out to neighboring cities. Washington, D.C. sent equipment and personnel. So did Philadelphia, New York, Wilmington, and several smaller municipalities. Firefighters and engines converged on Baltimore from across the region, representing some of the best-equipped fire departments in the country. And then they discovered the problem. Baltimore's fire hydrants used a different thread specification than the equipment brought by most of the incoming departments. Hoses that worked perfectly in Philadelphia would not screw onto Baltimore's hydrant outlets. Equipment from New York was similarly incompatible. Of the dozens of out-of-town units that arrived to help, a significant portion could not connect to the city's water supply at all. The fire burned for 30 hours. It destroyed 1,526 buildings across 140 acres of the downtown commercial district. Financial losses were estimated at $150 million in 1904 dollars, roughly $5 billion today. Remarkably, only one person died directly from the fire. though the economic devastation reshaped the city for decades. The aftermath was not just reconstruction, it was reckoning. Engineers, city planners, and fire service officials across the country looked at what had happened in Baltimore and recognized that the infrastructure problem was not local, it was national. Within years of the Baltimore Fire, coordinated efforts to standardize hydrant connections, hose threads, and water supply specifications began in earnest. The National Board of Fire Underwriters, an insurance industry organization with enormous financial incentive to reduce fire losses, pushed aggressively for uniform standards. Insurance companies had been paying claims on fire damage for decades. Baltimore clarified, in financial terms that were impossible to dispute, exactly how much money inconsistent infrastructure was costing them. Standardization did not happen overnight, but Baltimore accelerated it by a generation. The fire hydrant that exists today, the squat cast iron or ductile iron post, standing at every street corner in every American city, is not one invention. It is the accumulated result of roughly 2 centuries of failure analysis. Every design feature of a modern hydrant exists because something went wrong without it. The breakaway flange at the base, the section designed to snap cleanly if a vehicle strikes the hydrant, exists because cars began hitting hydrants with enough regularity that engineers had to design a failure mode that kept the underground water main intact, even when the surface fixture was destroyed. Without the breakaway, a car striking a hydrant would shear the pipe below ground, flooding the street and rendering the entire water main useless until repaired. The pentagonal operating nut, the 5-sided bolt used to open and close the hydrant valve, is deliberately non-standard to prevent unauthorized use. A standard square or hex nut can be operated with common tools. The Pentagon requires a specialized wrench, which limits access to trained personnel and reduces the frequency of hydrants being opened by civilians in non-emergency situations, which drains water pressure from the entire local distribution system. The color coding system used on hydrants in most American cities, different colors indicating different flow rates and water supply capacity, was standardized in the late 20th century to allow incoming firefighters to immediately assess what resources are available at any given hydrant without testing or consultation. Dry barrel hydrants, the type used in climates where freezing is a risk, keep water below the frost line at all times, only allowing it to rise into the barrel when the valve is opened. This prevents the hydrant itself from freezing solid in winter, a failure mode that killed people in northern cities throughout the 19th century, when frozen hydrants contributed to fire spreading unchecked. There are currently an estimated 8.7 million fire hydrants in the United States. They are inspected, flow tested, and maintained on regular schedules by municipal water departments. Each one is mapped in city infrastructure databases with its location, flow rate, and maintenance history recorded. The average American walks past fire hydrants dozens of times per week without giving them any attention at all, which is, in a way, the point. The entire history of the fire hydrant is the history of making catastrophic failure invisible, of building redundancy and reliability into infrastructure so thoroughly that the infrastructure disappears from conscious awareness. It worked. Urban fire deaths in the United States per capita have declined by more than 90% since the era when cities burned to the ground with regularity. The hydrant is a significant part of why. The last time most people think about a fire hydrant is when a car hits one and water shoots into the air. In that moment, water flooding a street, traffic stopped, repair crews called. What they are actually witnessing is the breakaway flange, doing exactly what it was designed to do. A failure that was engineered to fail safely. 2 centuries of getting it wrong, built into one cast iron post on a street corner. You just never had to think about what it took to put it there.